Recording is on.
Awesome. So I think the first item we want to talk about today is network policy, being the kind of major feature we were targeting for 1.7. There have been some issues raised. Hopefully everybody saw that on the PR for that about our use of the namespace for enabling and disabling network default deny. And it looks like we're going to need to rethink how that part of the proposal goes to GA. So I think
before we get too far into it, can I propose that we time box this discussion on the call, and if we run out, then we move it back to the PR or the email?
Yep. What do we propose as the time box?
15 minutes?
Is that 15 minutes?
15, okay.
Yeah, let's do that. So we'll end at 20 past. So I think we have a question to answer here about well, how do we want this to look in GA, and then a question about what can we still get done in 1.7.
You want me to give some background?
Yeah, go ahead.
So when we started network policy was on the order of a year ago, a little more than a year ago actually. We didn't have a strong concept of like core, what is the core of Kubernetes, and we needed a big switch to activate network policy, so we attached it to namespace. Since then, there's been a lot of attention spent on what is part of the core of Kubernetes, what are required features versus what are sort of optional features. There's work afoot around conformance to make sure that optional features are not net required as part of the conformance tests and those sorts of things. It's pretty clear to me that network policy is not a required feature, given that some networks don't implement it, and it shouldn't be a required feature. And as such, modifying the namespace object to have some vestige of network policy in it is probably a layering violation. This is what Clayton Coleman flagged on the PR. And at first I thought, who cares? And then the more I chewed on it, the more I realized he's actually right, which is always what happens with Clayton. And so the discussion now is, how do we proceed with that? And as Casey said, like, are there steps in between here and a finished thing? So the discussion on the PR identified like 6 or 7 different possible ways to fix this, ranging from like a global flag that would activate network policy for the entire cluster, all the way down to having a second API resource that was a sort of policy switch that you could put in the namespace. And once you put one of these in your namespace, then network policy is activated. Yeah, so we have a lot of options here. The second part of it is we have only a couple of weeks really before the code freeze for 1.7, and we need to decide what is actually achievable between now and then. No matter what we choose, this is going to be an API change and an implementation change, and all of the implementers who hopefully are here, I don't want to make everybody mad scramble to try to be compatible with it in the last 4 weeks of the release cycle. But I would like to hear if people think that that's actually okay. Like, what would be worse? Letting it sit in beta for another cycle, or making everybody mad scramble to be compatible with a different GA API?
Well, there was going to be a mad scramble anyway because we were switching from the annotation to the field. So people were going to have to do some updates to their code.
Yeah, well, I hope that most people got ahead of that because the PR has been open for 5 months. So I hope it wouldn't be too mad of a scramble. Now it's like literally...
And it's a change with exactly the same semantics. So yeah, it's not...
Exactly. Yeah, no matter what we do here, we're talking about some sort of semantic change.
Yeah, I mean, I lean towards getting it GA if we can, agree a semantic that we don't think is hugely onerous. A semantic change we think is not hugely onerous on people. And the reason why I lean towards that rather than pushing out another release is because, increasingly the question that we're having to answer in the field for users is, okay, how do I migrate? If I'm using this now, how do I migrate when it goes to GA? And the longer we leave it in beta with this uncertainty, the harder that becomes, and the more people who are actually using this beta feature who might have to go through some kind of dual provisioning phase during the upgrade. So I think there's a cost to the community for us leaving it in beta, and I think if as the network implementers we can we can scramble for a couple of weeks to avoid that cost, then I think that's what we should try and do. But it's caveat. I mean, that's caveated on us agreeing something that we think isn't hugely onerous. I think the options that were discussed, the options 6 and 7, so that was the no need for this flag at all option. Only apply policy if a policy object selects a pod, was option 6. I think that would probably be the one I'd lean towards, but the other one of just, a global flag then if people really need a flag. But that one to me feels a little bit more clumsy in a sense. It's very, very coarse grained.
Other implementers?
I think I would vote for well, if we come up with something we like, go with that. If we don't, then go to GA still with the annotation and fix that part later.
So move the resource to GA, but leave the namespace enablement switch as a beta?
Yes.
That's an option.
It is an option. It still precludes, for example, option 6 in that discussion, which actually does change the semantic of the network policy object itself.
That's true.
Right. Sorry. So I was saying definitely go with network policy to GA, even if we can't figure out a solution. Although if we can figure out a solution for the whole thing, great. But if we don't, I would say still go with the object to GA rather than punting that to 1.8.
Anybody else? Come on, I know you guys are out there.
So one of the things that I liked about option 6, which was that you don't have this global flag at all, and when pods are selected by a network policy, they automatically get a default deny. Was that it didn't prevent us from then adding other switches down the road, so you could still add a per namespace or a cluster default deny that would then affect everybody. But we could still go without adding a new API resource or trying to shim something in somewhere. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think I have the very same opinion. I think I would not continue with the namespace with annotating the namespace, because if you cannot make that work, users will start assuming that it will be a namespace setting, and we cannot go backwards. So if you don't have a good solution now, we should not set out set this as a bad example right now. Option 6 is I think straightforward to implement for everybody and relatively safe. I assume this is at least I assume everybody has some form of this in their plugin. I know that all of the major ones have this. Option 6 also does not exclude option 7 later on. Like even if we do option 6. So if option 6 is you start enforcing as soon as you have the first policy load. Option 7 would be you have a flag which could say always whitelist or always no policy at all. Right. So option 6 does not exclude option 7. I think option 6 is safe. Option 7 is safe as well. Continuing with an annotated namespace is kind of dangerous because we saw lots of issues in on how to get it work for GA. And unless we have that unless you have a good idea how to solve that, it's dangerous to make users use that sort of flag.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Yeah, and this point that if we go with the option 6, then we have the flexibility to add on additional layering at whatever scope we decide we want to do it later, whether it's in a namespace or globally or some other object to control the default.
Yes and no. We can't go from option 6 to what we have now. Because what we have now, it's possible to have network policies in a namespace but not have isolation enabled.
Yeah, that's true. So we'd be removing the ability for users to create an object in the API that doesn't do anything.
Which maybe we don't care about.
No, but I think we probably don't care. But I think you're right to point out that it is a change. It is one less feature. It might be a feature we don't care about.
So for the sake of time boxing, we don't need to discuss it all in full detail here. I would strongly recommend that anybody who has an implementation go to Dan Winship's PR and read the most recent threads, most recent comments rather. I think I posted a link to the mailing list. If you start at that point and read down from there, you'll get a sense of what is going on. And I would love to hear more, especially more of the implementers, because I've only heard a couple here, more of them weighing in on the practical implications of this. I would love to quick pivot and refine the design and say we're still good to go for GA, but I don't want to screw any vendors who are now left in a place where they're not compatible with the GA version, if I can avoid it. Or maybe they'll say that's better to do. Like I'm looking to all of you guys to tell me what I think the right answer is. But we need to decide this like within, say, the next 5 days or so, or any hope we have of getting changes in are gone. Cool?
Cool.
All right.
I have one more question regarding if we move the network policy to GA. Most likely this has already been discussed, but like if we introduce stuff like CIDR later on, right now in the ingress rule we have the from and the port are connected with an AND. If we later on extend that to something like a CIDR, obviously we cannot continue doing an AND for all the fields, right? Then like the port would need to match the from and the CIDR. Like did we all
port maps to the destination, right? It's allow traffic pod selector on port from. Today we only have from namespace selector or pod selector. I assume that if we added CIDR, it would be from CIDR, but it would still imply port, right? Like if I say my application is accepting on port 80, it doesn't matter whether I'm receiving from a namespace, a pod, a combination thereof, or a CIDR.
So the assumption would be at least one allowed source. It doesn't matter whether it's in a CIDR or in a namespace or in a from pod.
I mean, I guess if you specify none, you get. I mean, none is still semantically meaningful. It's just not useful, right?
My main question is
the spec says that exactly one of the from fields needs to be specified.
Okay. Cool.
So that currently means either namespace selector or pod selector. If we added CIDR, presumably it would be one of the three.
And I think it's an and if you specify multiple.
I think we disallow multiple right now.
Sorry, yeah. I mean, looking to the future, when we were discussing this in depth at the original time, we were talking about we can add in ands there, no problems, because all you can always do by having additional policies.
Right. Yes, but I think we should cross this when we get to it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not mutate in this way at the last second, please.
I'm mainly asking me that I thought I missed something. I just want to be sure that we can extend the CIDR later on. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, I think that's safe, and we should probably, assuming we get this into 1.7, we should consider that for 1.8. Because it's been asked for enough and we put it off for long enough.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay, next agenda topic. Was it me, Casey? Yeah.
That's you, Tim. Yeah, SIG Network
Oh,
format.
I want to talk for a minute. Surprise. I've been thinking a lot about our SIG here in our community, and I have a bad feeling. I feel like there's something wrong with the way we've set up our SIG. I'm looking at all the other SIGs that are active in the Kubernetes community. They are more productive and more engaged than we are. They're producing more, and I think we need to reorganize our SIG a little bit. So I'm proposing a list of potential concrete changes that we can make to the way we operate our SIG to try to be more valuable to the Kubernetes community overall. If you look at the list of flakes that get sent out every week, we are consistently one of the worst actors in the set. If you look at the number of bugs we have open, hundreds. If you look at the number of feature requests that come in and support requests that come in, we are very near the top of the list for every category. If you look at the quality of our documentation and the help requests that come in around networking, there's a lot of help wanted. So we're not doing a good enough job of all of these basic things that we should be doing. I fully acknowledge networking is probably the most complicated, convoluted, twisted subsystem in the entire Kubernetes ecosystem, but that doesn't mean we get to do a bad job of documenting ourselves. So this is not blaming anybody, or if it's blaming anybody, it's blaming me. So I think concretely, here's what I'm proposing. We should take topics like multi-network and we should relegate them to the mailing list. The mailing list is archived and is browsable and searchable in ways that the video hangouts are just not. I think we should leave highly contentious technical discussions for the mailing list. We should use the video call to break log jams when we need to, but I think the discussion should happen on the mailing list. I understand that that's painful and like everybody already gets enough email, trust me, I understand, but I think that's the better place to put it. I think what we should be doing on this call is more tactical. I think we should have a list of bugs, features, documentums, et cetera, that we're working on, and this should be a check-in meeting. How are things going? What other issues have come up? Are we on track to hit our goals for the quarter? We don't actually have goals for this quarter except GAing network policy. Like, there's not really, we never wrote OKRs or plans for what we were going to push into 1.7. Everybody sort of operated independently. I would like to fix that. So I propose very tactically that we come up with a list of bugs, flakes, and features that we would like to fix between now and the release of 1.7, which is about 6 weeks away. Code freeze is in 2, right? And we have about 4 weeks of fix-up. I'd like to propose that we make a list of these things, and that's all we discuss between now and the end of this quarter. I understand that this leaves some of the discussion around multi-network sort of twisting, and I feel bad for that. We should take it to the main list. I think it is so contentious that it's not going to resolve itself between now and the end of the quarter, but it could suck all the oxygen out of our room. And so I would much rather we focus on the enormous backlog of bugs that we've got and try to get people to volunteer to work on those bugs, close the old ones, dedupe them, help sort and triage them, work on our flakes. A large part of the reasons that Kubernetes tests are slow is networking. It would be great if we made these things better. And as we come into the end of this release and start looking at the 1.8 cycle, I'd like to do this at the very beginning. Call out a spreadsheet or a list of all of the things that we think we are working on, that we're committing to, all the things we'd like to get help on, and make it a very tactical release and see how that works for our SIG. I've been talking. Somebody yell at me.
With the addition of these things being more of a status update, do we think that once every 2 weeks is enough to accurately report the status, or if it's only going to be status, maybe the calls are shorter. Should we consider a weekly meeting?
That's a fair question. Chris, I want to publicly applaud you for the work you've been doing on bug triage and deduping and closing. It is the very definition of chopping wood and carrying water that we need to do more of. So thank you for that. Whether we meet weekly or not, I think we can decide. I first want to hear if anybody thinks I'm way off base. Silence is consent.
Yeah, I think at least SIG Node operates in that regard, where maybe if they're going to have a technical discussion, it is tightly time boxed, but the majority of the discussions happen in potentially external work groups, which might not be the best from a manageability standpoint sometimes, but the meetings are fairly fluid and stuff is kept on track for release.
And they get a lot done.
Yeah.
And storage is very similar. Storage has a very sort of project manager-y feel to their meetings. They're check in on bugs and docs and those sorts of things, and they get a lot done. And they don't have a whole lot of storage flakes left, and their tests are pretty good. And you know, these are places where we're sort of falling down over here. They also have regular face-to-face meetings where they'll spend 2 full days somewhere talking about the really hard topics and not doing it on this call, which is something I guess we could also do. All right, well, if nobody's going to complain, I'll let it sit. I'll write this up and send it to the mailing list as a more documented and searchable place, since I'm arguing for mailing lists. But if nobody's going to object to it, then maybe Dan, Casey, Christopher, and I can pull together. Maybe we'll get some extra people from Google and like go through our bug lists and like let's nominate ourselves, say 10 bugs between now and the end of this quarter that we really want to try to tackle. Some of them are probably people already working on, but we don't know about it. And some of them are probably things that we should throw onto our heap just to try to get some user-facing bugs backlogged. What do you guys think? I'm willing to take other volunteers. I don't want to do them a whole SIG triage process. It's expensive.
So it's a +1 for me on the overall thrust of the idea.
Yep, me too.
Same here.
So it would be great if all the people on the SIG who want features in 1.7 update the spreadsheet. I see a couple of features actually that are for 1.7, but I don't know what their current status is. So, and then a couple don't have owners.
Can you repost that spreadsheet to the mailing list?
Yeah, I'll do that.
So that was, anybody who can't see on my camera, that's Bowie at the back of the room.
I think it's also in the agenda doc, by the way.
Oh, cool. Okay.
At the top, actually, important links, V1.7 features spreadsheet at the top of our agenda.
Yeah, like for example, I see some stuff with like no owners, no reviewers, nothing, just the PR. So that would be good to fill in the details.
Okay, so we'll do that. How about we'll commit to doing a quick walk through all of the bugs. We've got some 200-ish open issues. We'll walk through them and try to come back with a proposal for things to fix via mailing list by, say, this time next week.
Yep.
Sound reasonable? We'll break it up somehow, and we'll scrub through them, and we'll collate and merge sort and whatever we need to do. And I would ask anybody who's watching along who doesn't maybe want to sign up to commit to this, but wants to help out, like, please go through the bug list. Or like open up the SIG Network label for issues on the main repo and like upvote the ones that you think are the most important, or comment on the ones that you think you have context on, or if you find some that are dupes, suggest that they're dupes, right? The more eyes will make light work of this. This is a low-level commitment. If you've got a half hour free between meetings, scrub 5 bugs, right? Just go look at them and see if they make sense.
Also, at the top of our agenda doc, the open issues link takes you directly to the list of issues tagged with SIG Network.
Cool. Also, if you find issues that aren't tagged with SIG Network, say so. Like message me or at me on the issue so that I or Dan or somebody can tag them properly. I tried to find all the other like area tags and make sure that they were all tagged as SIG Network, but it's entirely probable that I missed some.
Yep, there's also area Q proxy and area DNS that we should tag issues with.
Yes, yeah, we have multiple area tags, which if you can break it down even further, then that's great. We also have a separate DNS repo where probably DNS bugs should be filed against that at this point. Yeah, please like help. This is a place where everybody can pitch in and do just a little bit of work will go a long way. All right, I guess resounding silence. What's next?
Test flakes.
Test flakes. Yes. So also at the top of the SIG meeting notes and in the I've also put them in the spreadsheet. We have a tab for flakes that are labeled as against SIG Network, and there are quite a few of these. Well, there are 13 open at the moment. Quite a few of them have been open since December, so quite a ways back. I think we need to have a plan for how we're going to get this number down, and we need to be deciding which ones are critical to be fixing in 1.7, or which ones can just be closed because they're not an issue anymore.
Yeah, I haven't scrubbed through all the flakes, but honestly, like any flake that hasn't recurred in 3 months probably should just be closed. I don't know if we have any of those.
There are a few that are 2 months, but not quite 3 yet.
I'm willing to take 2. I'm willing to take 2 months. If it hasn't recurred since the 1.6 launch, we should probably just nuke it. And if it's really there, it'll come back eventually. And then the ones that are left will be the actually important ones. And I'd also like to point out, like, I know doing EDE work is not sexy, but it is hugely impactful. You know, when we spent the time to make the tests run faster with respect to like services in particular, the time it took for each PR test to run went down by like 10 minutes. So like it can be a huge impact if you can go through these tests and actually find places that are wasting time, or find flakes and get rid of places where you have to end up rerunning those tests. Or just even going through and looking at the output of a test run and fixing up the log messages so they're more human friendly.
So I can definitely go through and take a first pass at closing things that I think are inactive. But I think I'd like a little bit of help in terms of triaging the ones that are still active. Are there people who would be interested in signing up for looking at some of those with me?
Yeah, I can do that.
Can we get more volunteers from the non-usual crew? I'd love it if people step up to just like, I will look at one bug.
Casey, I'll help out with that too. It's some of those are kind of obscure. Like the test run just breaks entirely, and then it'll post. It literally posts, "This is so broken that I don't have test results." I'm not sure if those are indicative of anything, or if they're literally just a bad run that will happen from time to time.
Yeah, if we see those and we have no useful, actionable information in the bug, then we have no real recourse but to close it. There are flakes that are outside our control, like the test run on GCE and sometimes GCE flakes. So that's okay to close those. Another viable answer to a lot of these flakes is to add some more logging to the test and check that logging in and close the flake and hope that if it occurs again, we have more information. These are all valid answers. So.
Hey everyone, I have to drop off and apologize because it's not because I'm not interested in this topic, but something's just cropped up at my end.
Thanks. Anybody? Any other volunteers?
Yeah, I'm in too.
We've got the usual suspects at Google and Red Hat and Tigera.
I can try to help.
Who is that?
Paul Michaely.
Cool, thank you.
I'm sort of new, so it'll be.
No worries. Actually, welcome to all new people who we haven't seen before. It's really hard to sort of identify who's new because there's 35 or 40 people on the call. Welcome to everybody. Sorry, anybody who this is your first call, I'm sorry.
Yes,
but I really appreciate new people, especially new people who are willing to help chop some wood. And I think fixing EDE tests is a great way to become familiar with the system. You're going to be forced to trace it from beginning to end. So it's not always the sexiest, but it's probably useful.
I can also help out, but I brought my Kubernetes setup last week for the first time.
That's
so
great.
I'm pretty new.
That's great. Like, you know what, honestly, even if you don't fix the bug, if you end up spending time looking at it and asking questions, that's useful. Even if you send a pull request that just adds comments to the tests to explain what the tests are trying to do, that's useful.
Okay.
So what are the next steps on this then, Casey?
Yeah, I think it probably first thing is for me to just have a go through and prune out the obvious dead ends.
Okay.
And then I was thinking it might make sense if these people who have just volunteered we organize and assigned one issue each or flake each. Probably starting with the ones that are most recently occurring.
Okay.
And try to.
Yeah, so Casey, are these all in the spreadsheet, or how do you want to organize the assignments?
Yes, so I basically did a very quick run through of just finding all the ones labeled currently with SIG Network that looked like flakes or test failures, and added those to the spreadsheet. And I put the current owner as mentioned in GitHub in the owners column, but I'm not really confident that those owners are actively doing anything for some of those issues. So maybe it makes sense for me to first ping the people that have been assigned to those and see if they're actively investigating. I suspect for a large number of them, the answer there is no.
Okay.
Should we have maybe like a kind of mini quote unquote working group with the people who just volunteered, and we can chat on Slack or out of band about how we want to split these up?
Mailing list.
Mailing list, yes. Mailing list is a good option for that.
Works for me. Are the new volunteers on the SIG Network list?
Just open one issue.
It should open just one issue.
So we can't sort by frequency.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. If you're not on the list, jump on it. We can try to get a link to that in the agenda notes.
Yeah, there's also a link to it in our community README.
Cool. Okay, what's next on our agenda?
Yes, next on the list is IPv6 working group.
Excellent. Cool. Can I throw out a little bit about the governance process?
Go for it.
So many or some of you may know that there's been some hullabaloo about formalizing the Kubernetes project governance. So myself and a number of other people who've been around for a long time have been sitting down over the last couple of weeks to hammer out sort of a proto-constitution. And there's two main things that we're focusing on. The first is how do we formally elect sort of a steering committee for the project overall. And the second part of it is to formalize what it means to be a SIG. What authorities does a SIG have? What responsibilities does a SIG have? We've got a lot of these things sort of written down, but they're not really formal enough and they're not really enforced enough. And one of the concepts that has emerged from this is sort of a formal noun of a working group, which is which is different than a SIG, and has more bounded duration usually, and has sort of an objective. I think what some folks have been doing with the V6 work fits the definition of a working group perfectly, and I would love to use it sort of as a model for writing out this constitution of like what it means to be a working group. What I think we need, though, in order to really make it formal, is we need somebody to stand up as sort of the chair of that working group. Like, who is the point of contact for the V6 work? And maybe to write down a very short, like 1-paragraph statement of like what is the objective and bounds of the working group. Any of the V6 people here?
I think there are some of us here. Paul, myself, and Danian, and Brian. I'm sorry, Rob. There's 4 of us that have been working on it.
I've been sort of working around the edges from the CNI side and a few other places, so I'm interested, but I'm not sure I have the capacity to do any chairing or anything like that.
I intend this to be a very low overhead sort of thing, but yeah, I need somebody who I can say that's the person to talk to if you want to hear about V6.
Yeah, I could take the lead on that. This is Daniel Hansen. Yep.
Cool.
That's what I was waiting for.
I was trying to do it earlier. I'm like, how come no one's hearing me? Oh.
I was just about to volunteer you.
Cool. Awesome. So
Google Doc. I'm sorry, Tim. Just Google Doc and then post it to the mailer and get feedback, or
yeah, that'd be great. Just like literally like 1 paragraph of like what are we trying to do, and so that it's not an unbounded thing. And we will hopefully have some processes in place where we can actually post this information. So somebody who is new to the community could sort of go shopping for what working groups are active and what are they doing.
Cool. Yeah, I'll put something together and then get it on the mailer here in the next 4 or 5 days.
Awesome. Thank you.
Is there also a tag, Tim, or a label that we could put onto issues that are IPv6 related?
There isn't. I could probably make an argument for an area IPv6 tag.
That would actually be awesome.
All right.
I know we've got a whole bunch. I mean, I was thinking, hey, somebody could go scrub through the list and put the issues into a doc, but that seems pointless if we have a label.
All right. I will make an area IPv6 tag on the main repo, and anybody who wants to tag something as a V6 related PR or issue, please either tag it if you have the ability or let us know and we'll make sure we tag it.
Hey, Dan, thanks for bringing that up because I'm actually just getting ready to respond to your comments in one of my V6 PRs. Question I have for you, Dan, is do we have something like that in the CNI repo as well?
You mean a label of some kind, something like that?
Yeah, because we've got several people working on these small PRs, and it'd just be nice to be able to look across both of those repos using kind of the same type of tag approach or label approach.
Yeah, we don't have anything that I know of. I don't think it would be hard to add. That said, there probably aren't a ton of issues or PRs for IPv6 and CNI at this point, but I can certainly, either I or Brian Borum can try to add a tag of some kind for that. Also, Casey from CoreOS has a PR for the host local plugin that solves the IPAM versus IPAM 6 stuff and adds some ranges and makes the host local plugin IPv6 capable, which I think is one of the large outstanding pieces. And I think once he lands that, then we can start doing a lot more IPv6 enablement and clearing out the old IPv6 issues in the CNI repo.
Yeah, and it'd be nice to link that to, what is it, the 1443 main issue that we have in Kubernetes, because I know I'm looking at like the Kubernetes plugin, and on the back end it basically relies on the bridge and host local.
Yep.
Dan, who's working on that? I was just about to push up a PR for that as well.
Casey, his GitHub nick is Squeed, SQUEED.
Oh, okay.
So, and it's, let me find the issue number here. I think one of the problems with some of the previous PRs had been that they touched a few too many spots. The other thing was IPAM versus IPAM 6.
Yeah.
And we decided as the maintainers group to pursue the strategy that Casey did the PR for. So that's PR 451 on the CNI repo. I'll paste that into the agenda doc too.
Yeah, because I thought Dane had a few other PRs that were getting ready to land as well. So it'd just be nice to have something that we can just do a quick search across both repos and see the status.
Yep.
Cool. So I think that's all we've got today as an agenda.
Another really quick note on the CNI stuff, partly because of the CNCF discussions for CNI, but also because we've been talking about it for a while. We moved all of the CNI plugins into a separate repo called the plugins repo, and they will get removed from the main CNI repo, and that's an attempt to keep all the plugins in one place and kind of split out the spec so that the spec can be versioned independently of the plugins in a much better way. So just a heads up to anybody who's relying on CNI plugins, you at some point will probably want to re-vendor those plugins into your own code, and that will need to come from a different repo. Otherwise, you won't get any of the updates.
Hi, this is Gaurav from Intel. Is there any labels for the kubelet CNI bugs actually? Is there any particular labels to say like it's related to kubelet CNI or something?
Not that I know of, but Tim, what's the criteria?
There was an area CNI label, but I could be misremembering. I could totally be making that up, but
yeah, I'm not sure there's. Excuse me, I'm not sure there's an area CNI. I would assume the intersection of area or component kubelet and SIG network would probably suffice for this.
I don't see a CNI label.
Oops.
Just for information, Tim, what's the criteria for adding a label?
I don't think there is defined criteria at this point. There has to be, I would say, making stuff up on the spot. There has to be enough traffic on a particular topic to warrant having a label. So V6 seems pretty clear. There's going to be a long series of pull requests over the course of the next couple of releases. That one seems obvious. CNI stuff, possibly. I don't know how many bugs there are related to our CNI implementation in the main repo.
There's a few. I think they're mostly around host ports and things like that, and network readiness.
Is it sufficient to say component kubelet and area or SIG network?
My feeling is for now, probably.
Okay. If it turns out to be a problem, if we're losing stuff, then I can happily agitate for more labels. We just did a big culling of labels because there was a lot of labels that were never used or were only used once or twice.
Okay, so we will go through. Actually, me and another guy, Derek from Intel, is willing to work on the CNI related bugs. So that's why we were asking. So otherwise, we will try to look into and try to put some labels for the CNI related bugs.
Awesome. If you find that they're really hard to keep track of, let me know and we can talk about it.
Okay.
Cool. Anything else? Do we get 10 minutes back?
looks like it.
All right, so on the topic of multi-network, I think we still don't have a really solid position in one way or the other. I would continue to say we should bring that to the mailing list to discuss specifically use cases and really focus on concrete, real use cases that we can bring as examples of things to discuss.
Tim, I think you had mentioned that you had a related use case. Could you add that to the top of the document, the use cases section, if you haven't already?
I'm trying to remember what it was.
Something about NVIDIA and InfiniBand.
Oh yeah, right.
That's
right.
for a multi-network use case?
Yes.
Is V6 on there as well as for multi-network use case? More than V6, actually, dual stack, right?
Yeah, I think.
To me, those aren't directly. I mean, they're related, obviously, but I think V6 can be tackled separately. Anything that we might do in the future for multi-network would obviously include multiple IP addresses for each network, if that's how things shake out. So I think we'd have that solved either way.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is if we do enough plumbing for the API to allow dual stack, we will actually have done a lot of good stuff for the multi-network problem without actually having tackled the contentious part. Like those are the obvious parts. Like we need to support multiple addresses.
Yeah, and that's really kind of the flag that was raised in my mind, is being able to have a pod have a V4 and a V6 address.
Yeah, and we shouldn't, at the API level, shouldn't really care if that's multiple interfaces or a single interface, or really even what those IPs mean, just that there are more than one of them, and then we can discuss what the API looks like.
I think current status for multi-network was that we were still kind of collecting use cases, and at some point we start discussing them on the mailing list. So maybe that point is now, since we've had 2 weeks to collect use cases.
Okay.
So maybe we just declare open season on use case discussion and go from there.
All right, but full caveat, like all my attention is going to bugs and flakes and tests and docs between now and the end of the quarter.
Yep.
Whatever spare bandwidth I've got, I'll spend on multi-network. I made a bandwidth joke. No, all right. All right, are we done?
I think so.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.